down here to the Hill for probably 10 years now. One of the things that Senator Grassley said yesterday is that the truth shall set you free. It's indeed enlightening once as you have that freedom. When you come to that revelation that you're not nuts, you're not crazy, you're not insane, all this stuff. So I think today, starting out, I want to give a great big thank you for those pioneers like Marcel Reed, like Michael McCrae, like Marty Oakley, Neil Shelton, Caroline Douglas, Kathy Cole, and so many others that went before me to chart the path to be able to have these summits so that we could be a witness. Because the other day I came down here with my children, and we'll get into my story here in a minute, and they wanted to go to the Holocaust Museum. And there at the Holocaust Museum, it says, "You are my witnesses," Isaiah 43:1. So I go out and I tell everyone is that we are facing a crisis here in the United States of America, that we are seeing a level of corruption that is unparalleled, where there is no remedies of relief, and it's a lot of pious sentiments and platitudes that people say because as I begin to unravel the story in my own case, they say, "But Mr. Kinter, you won." I didn't win, I just exchanged battlefields. I moved from one to another. And I think that's predominant with any whistleblower that's in here and everyone that's in here. My case began in 2007 when, as the mother of my children, at 15 years, decided that she was going to trade me in to have somebody else in her life. Well, that was okay. But when we went to court, there was an allegation levied against me. An allegation where the court had put out their very first order, and they said either these children have been sexually molested by their father, or these children have been coached by the mother. The court finds that either is equally damaging. So I pressed the court, why was it that we were not having a veracity hearing to make a determination as to which was fact and which was fiction prior to making a decision that was going to have lifelong consequences for my children? They never would answer. 8 allegations, 12 investigations, and each and every single time they would get profoundly worse. Well, on May 15th, 2008, my parental rights was terminated to my children. And I kept saying, this isn't right. This isn't the United States of America. This isn't the nation that I grew up believing in. So I took the court to task, and I pressed, and I had my visitation rights reinstated. Hallelujah. I kept pressing, and every time that I would press, the court would come back and they would want to get into these negotiations. Whereas, well, Mr. Kinter, here's what we're going to do. We believe that it would be good for reunification that you would submit for us to have a coordinator and that you will see your children under supervised visitation. What the hell are you talking about? Okay? The state has a mandated duty, obligation, and a responsibility before they can take and limit my access to my children to produce evidence that I somehow possess a risk to my children. Not just simply grasp something out of thin air based on conjecture, speculation, innuendos, accusations, and a lie. Every single one of us that's in this room, we're all here because of one reason that started our cases, and that was a lie. That was someone else that had said something that was not factual. You cannot have justice if you do not have truth. The truth has to be continually dug in and continually pressed towards that objective. So the court, when I found out that I was unrelenting, they went ahead and granted me my children, and I was allowed to have my visitation rights reinstated. So on July 31st, 2011, the mother shows up at my house with the Springfield Police Department, launching the 8th allegation, which resulted in a total of 12 investigations. That once again I was under investigation by Hardin County Children's Services. for sexually abusing my children. I laughed. I was saying, "Oh, this is nothing. Surely we'll get into court. The judge will see it. We'll go through all this nonsense, and we'll get this all behind us because it's happened with such frequency and regularity that they have to be able to see the signs of it." Now, we kept on pressing, and the court wouldn't see the signs of it. They just kept turning a blind eye. I didn't know at that time that I would never see my children again for 17 months. It was probably the most hardest and most challenging time of my life. But I kept saying that I have to keep pressing. I have to keep going. We get into court in November of 2011, and the guardian ad litem had filed a report to the court saying that he would ask that my visitation be temporarily suspended once again or put on hold pending the investigations by Hardin County Children's Services. And I sat there and I was like, what the heck is this? Hardin County had concluded their investigation back in September, 2 months prior to you filing the paperwork. But yet the judge turned around and she went ahead and she granted his ex parte order to restrict my access to my children based on what he had filed, because my children allegedly stated that they feared their father because of the mental, physical, and sexual abuse that he was subjecting them to. Well, I decided to turn the tables, and I hired a group of attorneys, and we went in and they were saying, "Brian, we can't file suit against a judge. It's suicide. We're going to be ostracized and we will be put out of business." I said, "Your job, gentlemen, is to try to educate me because I'm a very ignorant man and bring me from kindergarten to a college education so that I can comprehend and understand the legalese in which they speak to be able to take it forward." On March 27, 2012, we made history when we brought the U.S. Marshals in and shut down the trial court in Champaign County, Ohio. Nobody heard about that on the 6 o'clock news. There was no fanfare. There was nobody out there giving me pats on the back and accolades. What happened was the judge came back in and said, "Mr. Kinter, we are putting a seal on the record, and you have a gag order that is prohibiting you from talking to anybody about this case." I laughed. I said, how can you be so ignorant? I'm accusing you, Your Honor, of committing a crime. You're aiding and abetting in parental alienation. You're turning a blind eye to the systematic abuse that's being delivered to my children, where they are being systematically programmed to have a lie cemented into their minds as though they are reality. Well, we kept on going through, and all the while that we're pressing forth through the court system, and we made it all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court on a pro se motion, and I praise God for the attorneys, Michelle McDonald's and others, that helped offer me guidance and direction along that road of life, because they went before me. They cleared a lot of paths, a lot of obstacles to get around the Rooker-Feldman, the Younger abstention, a lot of the other nonsense. So I was rejoicing when the U.S. Supreme Court sent back a letter saying that my case was docketed and that we were going for oral arguments on July 15, 2013. So I was rejoicing. 2 days prior to that, on July 13, 2013, the United States Supreme Court initiated Rule 28.8 that says no pro se litigant can take their case before the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, one has to question, why would you do that? The Supreme Court hasn't heard a pro se litigant's motion since 1978. So I began to dig in, and then Pamela, another group, and I say, well, we got to dig in and find out what's going on here. So I began to unravel the mystery that the United States Supreme Court established in the FCC versus the AT&T case that you could not have a monopoly. But yet here we have our judicial system that runs a monopoly. Because if you do not have an attorney, you cannot go forward. So, long story short, I kept prevailing or pressing and pressing and pressing, and I wound up with full custody of my children. And I rejoice because of that. There's still a lot of things, but the court is a retaliatorial agency. And so when I sit and I listen to people talk about retaliation and the abuse in which they submit, the other day, as we were preparing, we had all of our itinerary laid out for coming to this event. I get a notice in the mail from the court that I have to reappear again on Thursday in Hardin County to give an answer. I have to give an answer to why it was in 2009 the court had put an order out that I had that I must comply with seek work, that I have to take and go to 2 employers each and every single week, and then I have to provide the court now, going all the way back to 2009, with every one of those people that I went to see, their phone numbers, and who it was, and what was the results of those interviews. I never went to seek work. My work hasn't changed in 25 years. So I'm sitting there and I'm scratching my head and I'm saying, why would this be? Now, another interesting tidbit was that on April the 10th, 2018, I served notice upon all 9 U.S. Supreme Court justices. I believe that you violated my due process rights. I believe that I have the right to stand up and fight for my own children. I believe that Martin Luther King had set the precedence and the stage for us to all have equal rights. It's not predicated or based upon your checkbook or the lack thereof. It's supposed to be predicated upon the truth. So when I come to these summits, I get fired back up. It serves me well to get around to others that have been through it. Because, you know, the good book tells me in Isaiah, it says, assemble yourselves and come draw near together, you survivors of the nations. Because that's what we've been. We've been through the fires. We've been through the trials. We've been through the tribulations. And we see and we say, let our testimony, our words be a testimony for the benefit of others, so that in the hopes that they don't have to endure the pain, the anguish, the heartache, the grief, the suffering in which we've been inflicted with. But let us move forward as a society to say that it is time. Because another thing that Senator Grassley said yesterday was that it shouldn't take 10 years. But one of the things that the good senator didn't say was he didn't say, well, what is the time frame? Is it 9 years, 364 days? I remember when we were in court, and the court paints you with a brush. They'll paint you any way that they want. The other day when I listened to Francisco Portelos, Michael Carey, Frank Vitro, and I was watching the stories unfold as how the court painted you with a certain brush. Because that's exactly what they had done to me. They painted me as a monster. And because I had stood up to the court and was saying, wait a minute, all I'm wanting you to do is your jobs. So I take and I go back, I go to my congressmen, I go to my senators, I go everywhere, and I'm saying, wait a minute, let me understand this. I'm going to put it into graphic terms. So for those that really it's not appeasing to your appetite, I want to apologize. But I said, envision if you can going into a court and a judge call you into a chamber and that judge rapes you. Let's just propose. Because now, not literally but figuratively, that's exactly what happens in our courtrooms across this country each and every single day. You're taken into that courtroom and then they tell you, Marty, you're not allowed to tell anybody that I raped you. And then Yolanda, you make sure that all of the evidence is sealed where nobody will know that I raped her. And I'm saying, as a society, we need to be able to establish an open and honest dialogue and looking in depth as to what is the underbelly of the snake. What's the problem? And the problem is that we turn a blind eye to truth. We allow a lie. We become wrapped up in sensationalism, entertainment, all the other nonsense. You know, we can sit and we can say, well, we're warriors out here in the fight, and, oh, Marty, you got 3,000 likes on Facebook, okay? It does absolutely nothing. But when you go and you rally the troops and you say, listen. And I listened the other day to another fellow there, Jack Levine, I think his name was. Yeah, Jack Levine, who was an attorney. And Jack, if you're in the room, I don't see him here, but one of the things that Jack had said was, he said, I'm looking for an attorney to represent me. And I sat back and I was drawing the parallels because I think so often, so many of us that embrace this nonsense. We're waiting on that knight in shining armor. We're waiting on that one that's going to come in and they're going to make the wrongs right, that they're going to bring vindication. Well, here's the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ, is there's only one that sits in judgment. And I'm thanking God each and every single day of my life that He's afforded me the opportunities to be able to go through the fire and come out the other side without the smell of smoke. Because when I sit and I look at my children and my grandchildren, but then I also have a responsibility, because it's very troubling when you have your children and your children are crying for your time to be over here, and yet at the same time you know that you have to ward off those that are approaching on the other front of the battlefield, because as Marty said, as we get older, they're going to come in to pilferage, plunder your assets, your estates. They're going to take whatever it is that they want. So I tell my children is that freedom isn't free. It comes at a cost. And that cost is for you to be able to stand on your principles and your core values and being able to go forward. One of the things on the Whistleblower Summit that it said, and it should resonate with every single one of us here, was there was a petition dated February 19th, 1977. It's in your handbooks if anybody needs it. Said, we are ready to hazard everything that is dear and necessary. Are we? You don't know how many times I sat there that night and I cried when they were saying, Mr. Kinter, all you got to do is admit that you touched your children inappropriately. Well, what the hell does that mean, that I touched my children inappropriately? I mean, how do you draw that conclusion? And I was like, never once, you know? And I remember the day that they called and they said, well, my little girl, she was 7 years of age, and they said, have you ever touched your daughter's butt? I said, what are you people, morons? Of course I touched my daughter's butt. I pick her up by the butt, I wash her butt, I spanked her butt. I put cream on my daughter's pee-pee when she was a little child, okay? I was her daddy, I was her father. I never touched my child inappropriately. So then, long story short, the state comes back, they give me my daughter, and I'm sitting there and I'm saying, well, wait a minute. Why would the state do that? Why would the state give me back my child if the state had put me through 7.5 years of hell and torment, where I'm not allowed to see my children for a duration of 17 months one time, another time 11 months, another time 5 months, and you get them back, and no sooner would you get them back and there would be another allegation. Because the more entrenched and the more heart-wrenching the allegation was, the longer the duration of the stay of the absence. Is it time? Yeah. Okay. So I just wanted to tell everybody here, keep pressing, because we're making history. You know, it's going to change, and keep telling your story, because we're united as one voice. And I consider everybody in this room my brothers and sisters, and I just want to thank you all for listening to our testimony.
The next, because of we got one mic here, the next panel, we won't have any questions. The next panel will start at 5 after, so that